So hello, welcome. It's 11:30. I'm going to have Carly hit record if she hasn't already. Awesome. And we're going to get started. So I'm Jill Woodward. I'm a registered dietitian, and today you're joining a Cook Along with Treo series. And we've been doing these for some different clients around the Wisconsin area. And because it's National Nutrition Month, wanted to open it up and kind of share with everyone to celebrate health, wellness, and food, right? Because when you think about health and wellness, one of the first things that I think about is food, because as a dietitian, it's my favorite thing. Throughout my career, I've grown up in kitchens, commercial kitchens, and spent a lot of time around food. And my passion is really helping people find health and wellness through the foods that they enjoy, because eating to us is so much more than just basic nourishment. It means so many other things: tradition, it means family, it means satisfaction, all that stuff. So we're going to talk today about how to incorporate different foods into your day-to-day life in a very personalized way. So March, for those of you who don't know, is National Nutrition Month. And National Nutrition Month is to celebrate all things food. Really, we want to encourage healthy food choices and bringing awareness to making more healthy food choices in your day-to-day life. So the theme for this year by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is personalize your plate. And so I picked a couple recipes today that can be really versatile and can be personalized in a lot of different ways to make them easy, and also to make them use up stuff that you have in your pantry or on hand in your fridge. And that's the second theme of today's class, which is talking about food storage and minimizing food waste. So to set up the scene for how we're going to proceed through class, we are going to go through our two recipes. And throughout that, we're going to integrate some discussion around food storage and food storage techniques. The first thing we're going to do is start with the pasta. So I have a pot behind me, and we'll prepare the ingredients and we'll get that going. And then we're going to transition into making the energy bites. And throughout that, we'll kind of be watching the pasta. We're going to do a little bit of back and forth. And then at the end, we'll be able to have our pasta and our energy bite snacks ready to go. And we'll have learned a lot of cool tips about food storage. So thank you guys for joining. If you're just watching, enjoy the show, and let's get started. So I am going to add some olive oil to the pot behind me, and then I'm going to bring an onion up here and we're going to chop the onion, because the first step in the pasta recipe is to have your onions and garlic sauteing together. So I'm just going to grab my onion, and I have a little olive oil. Just going to put that up in the pot here. And you want about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. The best thing, I just like to cover the whole bottom of the pot. You can kind of see through there that it's pretty well covered. That way you're going to be able to evenly coat the onion and not have any burning. So the onion I've already cut off the other two ends. One of the best things, or some safety tips around cutting onion, is to have flat surfaces, right? These are round and they like to roll all over our cutting board. So we want to be safe about how we're handling fruits and vegetables. And so you want to get a sharp knife. I have about a 10-inch chef knife, and this is my go-to knife, versatile knife for the kitchen. So I have my onion. I put it on my flat side, and I'm just going to chop it through the center. And this is going to give me two halves. I'm going to peel off that outer layer right here. And then you can toss your outer layer into the garbage. I just have a little garbage bowl here to the side that I'm going to throw it in. And then I'm using the flat side, have a little bit of root here that I'm just going to cut off, slice that off real quick. So you putting your onion down on the flat side, I'm going to grip my knife with my two fingers around the blade. This allows for stability and allows you to go straight through the food that you're cutting. You don't want your finger on top, because this becomes pretty unstable and you could slip off pretty easy and slice your finger. So avoid that at all costs. So you're going to hold your knife in your hand, grip your blade to get a really good secure grip. Use your other hand to guide your knife through your onion. And I'm going to curl my fingers under so that I'm using the edge of my fingers as kind of like my guide for moving my knife through the onion. So I'm just going to slice through. We're going to dice this onion today. The recipe calls for sliced. It just depends on how you like to eat it in your dish. So I'm gonna go ahead and dice it up because that's how I like it. There we go. And I'm gonna do both sides. If you have a rounded belly blade, so one that kind of is round like this, you can use the rocking motion with your knife, and you don't really have to lift it up off of your cutting board. You can just kind of lift it up and lift up to the top. It's still touching the cutting board, and then rock through. And I'll do that on the other side so you can see that. So I'm gonna lift it up and rock it. If you have a straight blade, one that doesn't have that rocking curved belly, that's more of a pushing knife. So what you're gonna do is lift up and push through with your arm. So I'll demonstrate that, even though that's not the type of knife that this is, but you'll push down and through with your blade if I had a straight knife. There we go. All right. So my onions are ready. I'm gonna turn on the pot and we're gonna get these going so they can start to marry up with the garlic and get happy. All right. So I turn this on about medium low heat. I don't want it to be too hot. I don't want to scorch the onion. We just want to sweat it out a little bit, and that's going to help us bring out that flavor. Onion is an aromatic, meaning that it's going to release this flavor as we're cooking it. And I'm going to add in some garlic as well. So the recipe calls for about 5 cloves of garlic. So I know that sounds like a lot, but trust me, it's not. It's going to add a ton of flavor for your dish. I just have the already minced guy up here. I'm going to stir that together. There we go. Get that going. Perfect. All right. So that's gonna marry up, start to release some of our really good flavors. In the meantime, I'm gonna get the rest of the vegetables ready for that particular dish. So personalization is the name of the game, and simplicity is the name of the game when it comes to healthy eating, right? We wanna be able to make vegetables kind of a go-to food so that we can incorporate them more into our diet. We also want to make sure that we're picking things that we really enjoy eating, because if you don't enjoy it, you're certainly not going to eat it or make it again. And then we also want to think seasonal, because seasonality brings out a lot of extra flavor as well. So I have some cherry tomatoes for the dish. And then I grabbed a zucchini because for me, zucchini, I really like it. It's subtle in flavor and it's soft, meaning that it's going to be a delicate cooker. So this whole meal is going to come together in about 10 to 20 minutes. And I want something that's going to cook quickly. So I won't use like a root vegetable or anything like that that's going to take a long time. So we're going to use more delicate-like vegetables. You can choose whatever kind of vegetable you want, as long as it is something that'll cook about the same amount of time as the rest of the dish. So I have a zucchini and I'm going to cut it into quarters so that we can add that to the pot. So same chef's knife. I get this out of the side. And I have my zucchini. Now this is also round, so flat sides, right? Just going to chop off the edges. Get myself some flat surfaces here. And I'm going to go through the center of the zucchini and make 2 flat surfaces. Then I'm going to flip them over and cut them down the center as well, kind of the long style. This is going to make nice, perfect quarters, and I'll be able to dice it up pretty quickly. Now I'm also going to use that same rocking motion with my knife, so gripping my blade safely, using my guide hand to help me through here. And then I'm just going to dice. And this allows for that consistent size, because the best, or the most important part about this dish is obviously having it all come together at the same time. When you cook a one-pot meal, it is nice to have it all come together and all be cooked at the exact same time. So delicate vegetables cut about the same size. I did quarters and I chose zucchini because of the cooking time. So that helps us out. So that is my zucchini and it's all ready to go. I'm just going to give the pot a stir so I don't think starts to burn back here. Starting to smell good already. This doesn't take too long to kind of start that cooking process. We want to give the onions a little bit of a translucent look. They don't need to come all the way to being fully translucent, but that at least get us started. So the next food I have is a cherry tomato. So I have a couple of these and I'm going to cut up for you. And I want to show you a little tip. So cherry tomatoes are obviously very small and very round, right? Surprise, surprise. And they're a little bit slippery. So if I was just going to use my regular chef's knife, if it wasn't sharp enough, this could be a problem as far as making, a hazard with cutting yourself, because it would be easy for it to slip off. So instead, I'm just going to make this easy on myself, and I'm going to use the serrated knife. And this has all those little teeth that'll grip that slippery skin and cut through it pretty easily and very reliably. So I'm just going to cut these in half, mostly for texture and, so that you don't get those super hot, overly hot little cherry tomato bombs in your mouth as you're eating this dish. But these will be sliced in half. So I'm just using that serrated knife again, holding them still and cutting through the center. And you notice with that serrated knife how it's gripping the skin and cutting really easily. All right. So those guys are ready to go as well. Okay, so there's a couple of ingredients, and I'm going to move back over to the pot now. There's a couple of ingredients with this that I'm not going to add until the very end. So some of the ingredients in the dish are the fresh basil and the lemon juice. And I don't want to put that in until the very end, because I don't want, the basil to kind of lose its flavor and become a little bit bitter. And the same with the lemon juice. It's going to add a weird flavor as you overcook that. So I'm just going to add in the other vegetables. So I'm going to toss in my zucchini. Awesome. And my cherry tomatoes. Now you could also personalize this dish with some greens and wilt in things like spinach or whatever your favorite kind of greens are, kale, and you would do that at the end as well. So that's not a step that we're going to do here. Awesome. Just kind of stir to incorporate. It's looking good. All right. And then we're going to add some stock to the pot. And this will be the liquid for the noodles so that everything comes together at the same time. I'm going to measure this out only because I have a little less pasta today than the recipe calls for. So if you have the full box of whole wheat pasta, then you should use about 4 cups of stock. And that's about how much comes in one of these containers. So it kind of works out perfect. But I have maybe 2/3 of my pasta today. So that's what we're doing. That's the best part about cooking, right? And personalization. So I'm using up things that I have in my pantry. I'm using things that I know my family likes. So I'm going to go ahead and throw my noodles in. So I use the whole wheat pasta for a couple of reasons. One, because of the added fiber that I'm going to get from the whole wheat pasta. That is going to give me a little bit of extra mouthfeel. That's one, which I really like. And 2, it's going to give us added fiber, which is really good for nutrition. We like fiber. It's our favorite thing. All right, so that's going to get warm for a second. So I'm going to let that just kind of start to heat up. And in the meantime, I'm actually going to juice my lemon. So you can do this a lot of different ways, but I have a little strainer that I'm going to put over the top of a measuring cup, and this will allow me to catch all those seeds so I don't add them to my dish. And then I have this fun little juicing tool, and that's just what I like to use. You can obviously do this without any special equipment. You can just put your fingers over a bowl and squeeze the lemon face side up so that the juice runs down the side and you catch all the seeds in your hand. That's a great way to do it. Or you can do that like that right over the pot if you trust yourself. I don't always trust myself. So I have my juicing tool and I'm just going to use that to juice my lemon. I'm going to use this little strainer to catch all the seeds. That will get me the right amount of juice. So I know the recipe calls for about 1/4 of a cup of lemon juice. So that is going to be about a whole lemon, depending on the size of your lemon. You might have a little bit more, a little bit less, but that's okay. If you think you're going to have a little bit less, a great way to add extra lemon without having to, buy a whole new lemon or use up a whole other lemon that you only need half of, you can just zest the outside. So adding the lemon zest and however much juice you get will give you an awesome amount of lemon in this dish. So that was 1/2, and here's the other half. This dish also doesn't have a really thick sauce, which I kind of like for lots of reasons, but one of it is because you're getting a lot of the flavor from the garlic, from the lemon, from the basil, and you don't necessarily need any other heavy fats or anything like that to add the flavor to your dish. So it makes it really light. And again, really personalized because you could add any other flavorings that you want. So if you wanted other things besides just basil, you could throw in like an Italian seasoning, which will have other herbs in it, which I think is nice too. All right, just gonna shake this guy out a little bit, get all the extra juice. And that for me is 1/4 a cup. So it's pretty consistent actually. Lemons are great like that. All right, gonna toss that guy in the garbage bowl. Here's my lemon juice, and I'm gonna hold this to the side until the very end. So what's happening now in the one pot is that everything is gonna start absorbing. So the noodles will start absorbing that liquid, and that's gonna come together really nicely, and you're not gonna have a lot of extra stock. You'll be surprised how much liquid is actually gonna evaporate and or be absorbed by your noodles. So that helps because then it makes cleanup really easy. All right, so I'm gonna put this to the side. Looks good. That's another name of the game. I'm big on one pots because I have 2 little kids and cleaning up can take a really long time. So if you know anything about that, it's something I don't want to do all the time. Okay, we're gonna move on to the peanut butter bites as the one pot is cooking in the background. So just bear with me as I kind of like keep an eye on that because I want to make sure I stir those noodles in when they start to soften up. So I'm gonna take my cutting board away because I don't really need it for this. And I'm going to bring out the oats. So the peanut butter bites I chose this recipe again for a couple of reasons. One, because the versatility, right? The theme is personalize your plate for National Nutrition Month. So you can really get creative with this particular snack. You're adding in, the base of this is rolled oats. So these are just old-fashioned rolled oats. I use the food processor actually to kind of break it up a little bit more to make it a little more powdery. I only did this because my children and texture do not always get along. So I made it a little more fine so that it's not these big chunks of oats. You don't have to do that. You can do it however you like. That's one step of personalization. The oats are going to give me tons of fiber and they are a source of protein. Then I'm going to add in the nut butter. So today I have peanut butter. I just bought the natural kind. So that is definitely a good option. Creamy is your best bet with this, just because of the ability to mix in really nicely with the oats. But you can use whatever kind of nut butter you like. If you like sunflower butter or cashew butter, almond butter, whatever you want to work with is absolutely up to you. My only suggestion is because some of those butters don't always have the same consistency as a peanut butter. They're not always as soft or as spreadable. So I would put them in a glass measuring cup or glass bowl and put it in your microwave a couple of seconds before you use it, because that'll thin it out and make it a lot easier to work with in this particular snack. So like I said, if you have allergies or whatever you're working with, you can definitely customize whatever your binding agent is. The next bit is the chocolate part, my fave. So I have mini chocolate chips because this is what I have on hand. I have about 1/4 a cup here, maybe 1/3 of a cup, and I'm gonna add that in. So you could use anything you like. Again, customization is the name of the game. I've made these before with leftover Easter candy. I've just taken all the Hershey Kisses and all the different candies, M&Ms, put them in a Ziploc bag and used my meat tenderizer mallet, chopped them up, threw them in, and that was a great way to use up the rest of that candy. So you can do whatever you like as far as the candy part if you want it, or you can leave it out altogether. I also have shredded coconut. Again, this is just something that I really like. So I'm gonna add that in, same ratio. So I have about 1/3, maybe 1/4 of a cup of my coconut. Awesome, it's getting a little bit softer. We're gonna put that on a little bit higher to try to bring to a boil in the background. And it's gonna sit there for probably about 8 to 10 minutes. So we'll let that get happy. All right, and then after the coconut, I'm gonna go ahead and add in chia seed. So I like to add the chia seed for a couple of reasons. One, because it adds as another binding agent and keeps these together. So it's gonna help with texture, it's gonna help with holding it together so it won't be crumbly. And then the other is that it's a good source of protein, actually. So I have about 2 tablespoons of chia seeds, and that actually adds about 6 grams of protein to this overall snack. So it's a good amount. Obviously, you're not going to eat all 2 tablespoons in one snack ball, but you know, every little bit helps. All right, I'm going to grab a measuring spoon here. And then the next part is to add a little vanilla and a little honey, or whatever type of flavor you want to add. So you can make these taste a little bit more like banana bread if you wanted. You could use like a banana extract. You can use almond extract. You can use whatever you like. I have vanilla, and I'm going to go for about a teaspoon. Going to toss that guy in. Not too much. You don't want to go crazy with your extract. They kind of add funky flavors after a while. And then I just have some honey, but again, you can use whatever you like. If you want to have like agave, or if you have maple syrup, if you have any type of sweetener that you want to use, or again, leave it out. So very customizable. You can use this with a lot of different types of things. You just want to add something that's going to add a little bit of a binding, right? So just kind of eyeball that in there. So I have a good kind of mixture of my base ingredients. So again, the foundation of this snack is oats, which is giving me fiber, protein, and I have the nut butters, fats and protein. That's going to help with keeping you feeling full for a long time. And then you also have all the other little add-ins which add flavor and fun, and chia for some extra protein. So this is a great snack because it can really keep you feeling full for quite a long time. All right, and then I'm going to throw in the nut butter. Now, if you remember, we washed our hands at the beginning of this. We're about to get sticky, everybody. I prefer to use my hands for this because it's easier to combine everything. So I have about 2 cups of oats and about 1, maybe a little bit less, 1 cup of peanut butter. So the ratio is kind of like 2 to 1. So you can mix and match that however you like. I said you can add a little bit more peanut butter if you like that, or whatever the nut butter is that you're using, or you could do a little bit less depending on what you like as far as texture goes, or what your family likes, because at the end of the day, you got to eat it, right? People in your house have to eat it. So that's, I think, one of the more important things about healthy cooking, or incorporating new healthy ideas into your day-to-day routine, which is making sure you're doing things that are familiar, somewhat familiar, and just enhancing them a little bit so that you get people to kind of try it out and experience it. This is also a really great recipe to do with your family, especially kids, because there's no heat involved, right? I'm not using any mixers. I'm not cooking anything. The hardest part about this is mixing up the peanut butter part and then putting it in the fridge to chill down. And you have to wait a couple minutes before you can eat it. So that is kind of nice because you can really use that with the kiddos. All right, my noodles are starting to absorb that pasta, coming together. Looking good back here. Wish you guys could smell this. I'm sure if you're cooking along, you can smell it at your house. Smelling really good. All right, I just wanted to give that a quick stir before we jump into this mixing. All right, so I'm using my spoon right now just to begin to incorporate it, but then I'm gonna start using my hands. This just helps out a little bit. All right, and then I have a plate for where they're gonna go after the fact. Move some of my supplies out of the way. There we go. I'm just gonna get right in there and start mixing it up. Awesome. So these, after we're done, we're gonna put them in the refrigerator to chill. And I have a plate because I don't want them to all stick together. Eventually, I'm gonna transfer them to an airtight container and they'll be able to stay in the fridge for a pretty long time, about a week or so. If they last that long, depends on your house, right? They definitely do not last that long in my house. So that'll be nice, but I want to make sure that they get cold before we kind of lump them all together, or they're going to stick together. All right, so this is pretty well incorporated. You're going to do it kind of like a dough. Make sure you get all the dry parts in there, smelling delicious everywhere. Good thing we're all having lunch right after this, right? Awesome. All right. So then I'm going to take about a golf ball size serving and mix that up and make it into a little ball and put that on my tray. So we'll be going through this for a little bit. Just on my pot, bubbling away. Sounds great back there. Carly, do we have any questions so far?
No questions yet, but we do have the comment that the Easter candy tip is perfect timing because folks will certainly be inundated with more sweets, especially because that's kind of like a tradition, and especially if you've got kids in the house. So great tip there. Definitely will probably be useful because it's just tough when you have those things laying around.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an awesome one. Yeah, I mean, I do this Halloween, any of the, I mean, every holiday, I feel like we get tons of candy and we don't know what to do with it all, and you feel bad wasting it. So there's lots of ways to kind of incorporate it into more healthful snacks so that you're still eating all the sweets and stuff, but you get these healthy ingredients to go along with it. Things that are going to make you feel full, things that are going to give you protein, lots of lasting energy, fiber, all of that. So it's definitely a good way to use that up.
Another question we had was about the way that you keep your knives sharp and ready to go. So one session you had previously, you mentioned a brand of knives as well as an electric sharpener that you use. Could you mention any of that info again, just for folks who want to keep those blades sharp?
Yeah, so having a really sharp knife is one of the most essential kitchen gadgets or things that you would want in your kitchen for sure. So I use, here, I'm just gonna rinse my hands because I can grab the sharpener quick and show you. That's the one part about this dish is you get peanut butter all over yourself, but that's okay. I don't always remember the name of this guy off the top of my head. So I use a handy dandy little Sharp Pro sharpener, and it just looks like this. This is where you hold it, and you just slide the blade through, and there's 3 different gauges or 3 different stages of sharpening, honing, and polishing. So the most important thing is to sharpen your knives before you use them. I sharpen them probably once every couple of weeks because we use them a lot. You don't necessarily have to do it that much. Commercial kitchens do it like definitely once a week. You probably only have to really do it once a month. Just depends again on how much you're using it. But I would sharpen your knife, make sure that it stays sharp, and then keep it in a safe place. So knife blocks are great, but from an accessibility standpoint, they can lead to some safety hazards. So I actually have a knife block that's in my drawer. That way it's away from the kids, they can't grab it, but it's also kind of tucked under some stuff. And then the blades actually are resting in that knife block on on the handles, not on the blade itself. So that way it's not wearing off the bottom of the blade. So making sure you have a good sharp knife is essential because you actually have more reliability when you go to cut something. Sorry, my earphone is like falling out. Okay, so when you don't want things to slip and slide. So the sharper the knife, the more reliably it will cut through something. And so that is really helpful when you're slicing stuff, especially if you're going quick or whatever you're doing, because that will ensure that you make sure that you don't cut your fingers off. The other thing, that knife sharpener comes with a cut glove. So if you're worried about it in any way, you can use some safety equipment like that. You put the cut glove on your guide hand so that if you're cutting and you slip, the fibers of that glove won't allow the knife to cut your skin.
Okay, quick question about the energy balls, and this is maybe too much information, but I struggle with self-control when I have sweets in the house. And I made a similar recipe to this before, and I made them disappear kind of quick. So my question for you is, when I make these this afternoon, should I reduce the amounts, or can I freeze back a portion of the mixture? So are they freezable?
Yes, all of the above. So you can make this in small batches if you would rather have just a few around. You can absolutely freeze them. Just thaw them in your refrigerator for a couple of hours before you plan to eat it. But that is a great idea to freeze them if you go ahead and make the full batch and you don't think you're going to get through them that fast or you don't want to. The other thing too, and what's nice about having the peanut butter and the oats, it doesn't take that many to kind of fill you up. So if you're having this as a snack, it's going to be pretty satisfying because it adds healthy fats, it adds protein, it adds fiber, it adds a lot of great things that'll help you stay fuller longer, which is a really important thing in a snack. You don't want to just have, a one food type snack that's only really going to have like just carbohydrate or that type of thing, because then it'll not last as long. So this is a good one for lasting longer. But that's a good question. Freezing is always my favorite tip. Okay, so that's a good segue into some food storage stuff that I wanted to share today, because one of the number one questions I got in prepping for this class was around making vegetables more of a go-to food. And obviously this dish makes them easy because you can throw in whatever you have on hand. And that's really versatile. But if you buy a lot of vegetables but don't really use them up, you might end up wasting quite a few. And another option, or as we're going to talk about with some storage tips, when you make them easier to eat or easier to grab and go, then you're more likely to actually consume them, because then it becomes you're removing the barrier of time, because a lot of us are busy. Yep. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is storing your greens. So if you buy lettuce or kale or any of the greenery, usually you might get it in a bag or you get it as a head of lettuce. If you're buying it as a head of lettuce, it'll last for a pretty long amount of time, kind of as it is. If you buy like a bag of romaine hearts or you buy a bunch of kale, the number one enemy of all of the fruits and vegetables in your refrigerator is moisture. So moisture is what's going to add to it wilting faster, becoming not so good faster, losing its consistency, rotting, all of those things, right? So we want to try to avoid moisture as much as possible. I'm just going to take a little step to the side. So one of the tips that I like to share, and I just bought some kale, so I thought I would show this to you guys. I get the kale home and I rinse it off, and then I lay it flat on a towel and I just roll it up in a towel. And this is a clean towel, and I roll that up, and this will stay fresh in my refrigerator for a couple of weeks, like weeks, because I'm the towel is wicking away the moisture and it's keeping this really fresh and really crisp. So I'm not having to waste my greens as much, because maybe I'm not going to eat all of this in one go. I maybe won't even eat all of it in 1 week. But this allows me to keep it stored in my fridge and keep it fresh for a lot longer, because I have the towel that's keeping that moisture away.
And Jill, do you use that crisper drawer on the bottom? Is that basically the main purpose of it? It's just kind of separate it from the rest of the food?
Yeah. So there's two different drawers around crisping. There's the high moisture and there's a low moisture drawer. So certain things do better in higher moisture or lower moisture. So for example, a green onion actually really likes moisture. So you would want to keep that in the higher moisture setting. Whereas things like kale and your berries and stuff like that need lower moisture. So you can keep those in those two different drawers. But yes, very good tip. All right. This is sizzling away, coming together really well. I know it's probably been a little bit longer, so I'm going to turn this off actually. I'm losing track of my time here. All right, so I'm going to pause on the peanut butter bowl so we can finish up the pasta. So I'm just going to push this to the side. All right, so today I don't have any fresh basil, and that's perfectly fine. You can use dry. You just remember that you don't need quite as much. So the recipe calls for about a half a cup of fresh basil, and I don't have fresh, so I'm going to use about a 2 tablespoons, excuse me, of dry. So I'm going to go ahead and put that guy in. There we go. And I turn the heat off for this stage because I don't really want to continue cooking. It's going to continue cooking a little bit. We have some residual heat going on. So I'm going to start tossing in that basil. That's going to bring out a lot of fresh flavor, make this feel really spring-like. That's another option for this dish. Is it's really good. It's pretty versatile as far as like using up the spring vegetables, because spring vegetables tend to be a little more delicate. So we're going to use the zucchini, things like that, and then the basil, and now I'm going to add in my lemon juice at this stage. Again, you want the lemon juice here to really bring out that flavor and kind of get a sauce going for yourself. You don't necessarily want to have it at the beginning because you're going to have weird flavors that start happening because of that. So I used the aromatics first, cooked everything in the liquid. That liquid absorbed into the noodle as well as evaporated and into the vegetables. And so now my pasta is totally ready to go. You can add in lots of other things at this stage. You could throw in cheese if you have cheese. If you were going to wilt in greens, I would have done that right around now. I can just put the greens on top, put a lid on, and let that just sit for a little bit. It'll wilt those greens and you can mix them in. It's a super great idea. Other spring vegetables that you can add in, you could do this with asparagus. If you chop that pretty small, that would cook up pretty quickly. And you can also use like spring peas. Those are great too. So that's the pasta. We're going to finish up some of these and talk a little more storage. All right. So another tip is using fresh herbs, right? Because fresh herbs bring out a ton of flavor in your food without adding a lot of extra things like oils and salt and things like that that maybe contribute to more negative health outcomes. So one of the things I like to do is buy some fresh herbs. Well, if you're like me, you buy a big old batch of it for one recipe, and then you have a ton of it left over and you're not sure how to use it. Maybe you'll use it next week when you meal plan again, but it's not always as easy to use it up all in the exact same week. So a tip that I have for you is to treat your herbs like flowers, and I will show you. So when you bring your herbs home from the grocery store, you can cut, this is just cilantro, you can just cut the ends like you would a flower, where you're going to snip the ends of it kind of on an angle, and put it in a glass jar with some water, and put this like that, and stick this right in your fridge, and it'll kind of stay fresh. I mean, you might get a little bit here and there that are a little more wilty because maybe they're not all the way in the water, but these guys up top are perfectly fresh. And this I've had now for over a week. So you can keep it for about 2 weeks in your fridge this way, and it definitely preserves the life of your fresh herbs, and they don't get as mushy and kind of moisture ridden in the drawers if you kind of keep them all together. If you don't have space for a stand-up jar with water, another great tip is to put it in a bag, zip bag, whatever you have, with a paper towel. Again, that paper towel is going to wick away that moisture and keep them looking more fresh a whole lot longer and a lot more usable, which is what you want. All right, and then the next one I have are some berries. So when it comes to fruit, we know obviously it's great to eat a lot of different colors. but sometimes we tend to buy a lot with good intentions and not eat them. So my number one food storage tip is always eat the food. That's number one. But number two, start with your delicate food and move to the hearty food. So berries are always the most delicate when it comes to fruit, right? So raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, all of those, they tend to be the most delicate. They don't last as long. They go bad a lot quicker. Things that sit out, like your bananas, oranges, apples, things like that, they can last a lot longer. They're a little more hardy. So you don't need to eat those as quickly as you do berries. So a real good tip to keep your berries lasting longer, when you get them home, either then or within a couple of days, you don't have to do every food storage tip the day you bring stuff home. I really like to share that because if you're like me and you grocery shop in a hurry and you're like running all over with your kids, taking them to this practice or that practice, you know that it is time consuming to prep all of your ingredients when you get them home. So don't put that pressure on. You have a couple of days, you can kind of spread it out and do it as you use it, right? So I bought these a couple of days ago and I just washed them yesterday. So I bought them and then I washed them yesterday because that was the first day we used them. So I washed them in a little bit of a saltwater rinse, and that is just kind of helping get rid of that extra dirt, but it's also helping preserve it a little bit longer. And you could swap that out with like a vinegar wash if you wanted to do that as well. But just make sure you use a small amount and rinse that off. And then you let that dry. So put it out on a towel on your countertop, use a paper towel, dry it off. And after it's all dry, I just put it right back in the exact same container because these containers have little breathable air holes, which is good. It's going to help wick away the moisture as well. And then I just lined the bottom with a paper towel. So having that paper towel in there, again, is kind of keeping the moisture off. Like I keep saying, moisture is the enemy of these things in your refrigerator. So we want to try to keep them as dry as we can. So you can replace the paper towel every couple of days if you think that it needs that, if you haven't eaten them all yet. But this will help keep them lasting a whole lot longer. You can also put them into a glass container, have a little paper towel in there, or you can use a regular towel if you don't want to use a lot of paper towel. So that's also a super awesome tip for berries or any other vegetable or fruit, really. The other thing I wanted to mention, I don't have any today, but sometimes I buy celery, but I don't always use a lot of it. I feel like that's a lot of us, right? So we buy celery for a recipe, especially in the winter when you're making soups and stews. It's a great flavor component for those things, but we don't always use it up. So I'll notice that it's getting kind of soft or wilty or very bendable in the fridge. A way to revive that is to get a glass jar or any other taller container and fill it up with water. Cut your celery down so that it can fit in that glass jar standing straight up. And then you can put that in your fridge for a while and it kind of brings it back to life. It'll crisp it back up for you. So that has worked great for me, especially buying celery, using it for one recipe and then having like half of that in there after a while and not knowing what to do with it. So being able to kind of revive it and use it again, either as a snack for my kids or in another recipe, is great. So that's good. Carly, any food storage questions coming through?
No food storage questions. One tip on the celery, because you know, I live alone, so I constantly battle with too many of certain things. I just can't eat that much celery. I just chop it up and throw it in the freezer, and then when I make stock, because you know it's going to get mushy when it's in a pressure cooker anyway, it just helps give that celery flavor. And then I oftentimes use an immersion blender anyway, so I really don't care about it staying crispy. But yeah, I'm making good use of my freezer these days, just because, you know, not a lot of friends coming over for dinner parties or anything. So yep, making use of that freezer.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's an excellent point too, because you can always have a bag in your freezer for like food waste. If you are going to make stocks with that, you can use all the ends of like the onions that I chopped up today, celery, carrots, whatever you have. You can throw it in that freezer bag and use it for stock. That's awesome. You could also just use that for composting later. So you can just kind of keep it for a while and use it for composting if that's something that you do. That's an awesome tip. All right.
One last question is about protein add-ins. So probably like a lot of folks, you know, when I serve a meal, I just grew up in a family that ate a lot of meat. So would you ever serve this meal and then have something else going on the side? Or because like I did it with air fried chicken before and it worked really well. I know not everyone has an air fryer, but it's just, you know, when I'm one person, it's hard to heat up the whole oven. So I don't know, do you use any other protein additions to that fresh pasta you made?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. So this, again, is another way for it to be personalized, right? So this is kind of like a foundational meal that you can add or swap things out of. So again, like the foundation was the noodles and the broth and the vegetables, and I can top that with chicken. I can add shrimp to this. I could cook up some white fish. I could use this as a side dish for any other protein that I'm serving, grilled chicken, steak, whatever you're making. This can be very versatile in that regard. So you can, like I said, mix and match. You can throw some cheese in here too. Like I just didn't do that today, but you absolutely can. And I think that makes it really versatile. One tip, because when we did this class before, I had someone suggest or ask if they could swap out the pasta for a veggie-based noodle. And I'll tell you that it will not cook the same. So the whole wheat pasta is absorbing that liquid, and it's also kind of helping that liquid evaporate as you're cooking it. So it's the whole point of it is trying to kind of use this one pot and cook at the same time. A vegetable noodle will not cook the same way because it's not going to absorb the liquid like a wheat or regular pasta noodle absorbs liquid, right? Because your vegetable is already full of liquid, so it's not going to absorb it really. So you're going to end up with a very soupy meal if you just straight swap it. So if you're going to use a vegetable noodle substitute, which is fine, you're just going to want to change how you cook it. So you'll reduce the actual broth that you're using, and you also might need to strain your dish at the end. That way, and also the cook time will be significantly reduced because those pasta or those veg noodles cook really quickly. So you don't need to have it cook nearly as long. So if you're going to do that, I would cook all your vegetables that you're going to have in the base of the product or base of the dish. So like I did today, zucchini, tomatoes, onions, garlic, all that's going to cook down. Then throw in those veg noodles with a little bit of pasta water or a little bit of broth. Wow. Let that cook a little bit and then drain it. You don't really need to cook it in the same way, but you can absolutely make that change. So it's up to you. Okay, awesome. I have a couple other food storage tips that I just wanted to share. So one of the things that I think is really important around food storage is also food safety. So that is something that you want to take into consideration when you're putting things away in your refrigerator. Think ready to eat on the top shelf, right? Because if you're going to go and grab it out of the fridge and just take a bite, you want it to be somewhere that doesn't have things dripping on it or getting on it or any cross contact at all. So I put all my ready to eat foods at the top of the fridge. So that's your fresh produce, things like that you really are just going to grab and eat. You want that up high. Anything raw, so your raw meats are going to be the lowest possible, or put them in a container of some kind, right? So it depends on how it's packaged. You don't want your raw meat sitting at the top, dripping things down onto your ready to eat food. So if you have a container, like a clear container or a plastic bin or something that you're going to wrap up your meats in and have that in your fridge, that works because it'll keep the juices contained. You just want to make sure that nothing can drip out of those raw products onto your ready to eat products. That's good. All right. Do we have any other questions at all?
No questions yet.
Okay, awesome. So then the other thing I'll mention is just around meat and the length of time to store it, right? So this is a big question I get is around for food storage is around keeping your proteins in the fridge and for how long. So if you have raw chicken, raw beef, raw, whatever you have in your fridge, you're really looking at a 2 to 3 day shelf life in your refrigerator. These things have really high moisture content and they're pretty perishable. So we don't want them sitting around for a really long time. If you're not going to use it within 2 to 3 days of purchasing, go ahead and stick it in your freezer. That's your best bet. Otherwise, cook it up and then you can use it again. It'll last a little bit longer once it's cooked. But if it's raw, just make sure you're using it within 2 to 3 days. The other thing to think about is keeping the oxygen away from the product, because you don't want any of that oxygen to start to react with your meats and oxidize and start kind of making it turn, if you will. So one way to do that is to use parchment paper. So if you have a cut of steak or a cut of chicken, you can put parchment paper and your chicken, then parchment paper on top of that. And that's going to create a little bit of a seal around your meat product to keep it a little bit longer, because you're not letting as much oxygen get into the food itself. So I would do the kind of the parchment paper wrap and then seal it up in something, plastic bag, airtight container, whatever you have. You could also do it with plastic wrap. It doesn't really work as well if you're doing like a towel of some sort, because that's not going to keep the air off as much as a more solid plastic surface or glass container or something like that. So just know that you're trying to keep air out. Oxygen and moisture are not so great for your foods in the fridge. So any way that you can work to keep that away from those products is going to help you keep their shelf life lasting longer.
I buy a lot of meat that is close to its expiration date. If that goes straight into the freezer, then when I thaw it, do I have 2 to 3 days, or do I need to like cook it right when it thaws same day?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if I do the same thing, because a lot of times you're going to get good sales on stuff like that for sure. So make sure that when you get it home, you wrap it in some sort of airtight type of wrapping. So usually what I do is I wrap it with saran wrap, and then I put it in a Ziploc bag as airtight as I can, and that goes in my freezer. I label it, I know what it is, right? You can do a tin foil, you can do whatever you like, but having that barrier, that plastic wrap barrier, is going to help keep it fresh for as long as possible. You'll avoid a lot of freezer burn in your freezer that way. When you are ready to cook that, you'll thaw it. You'll definitely want to thaw it in your fridge, which could take up to 24 hours, depending on the product that you have. And then you're going to want to cook it that next day. I wouldn't thaw it and leave it sit there for 3 or 4 days. It's definitely not going to have great quality. It's probably not going to be so good. So you want to cook it as quickly as you can, as close to when you thaw it out. There's one safe thawing method outside of the refrigerator. If you need to do like a rapid thaw, you're going to put it in your sink and have it under running cold water. I know it feels like a big waste of water. It definitely is. If you can avoid this, don't do it. Try to thaw in your fridge as much as possible, but do your best to avoid just thawing it at room temperature or thawing it under hot water. What you're doing is you're accelerating that, you're heightening the temperature really quickly, and you're allowing bacteria to grow a lot faster. So that could be problematic as far as foodborne illness. Awesome. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes left, and we have our awesome snack here. I'm going to put these in the refrigerator just as they are, because that will get them a little bit hard on the outside. Then I can transfer them in about 20 to 30 minutes into an airtight container that I'm going to store in the fridge for a while. And then my pasta back here is totally ready to go. As you can see, there's not like an intense sauce on this, right? So as we talked pretty extensively about the versatility here, I can use this for pretty much anything. As a side dish, as a main dish, it's an awesome option. So that is going to be my lunch here in just a couple of minutes. This will last in my refrigerator for 3 to 4 days. It probably wouldn't last too much longer. I also don't recommend freezing this particular meal because of those delicate vegetables. Because you have cooked zucchini and cooked tomato, they're not going to hold up in your freezer, and they're just going to get kind of mushy when you thaw it out. So it's best to just eat it. If you have a lot, share with your neighbors, or feed it to your family, which is what I'm hoping to do, which is on the docket for today. So with that, if there's no other questions, I just want to take a couple of seconds to thank you guys for joining and talk really briefly about Treo and share a secret word for the Green Bay group, because I know I have a group of people on the call today from the Green Bay Diocese. So your secret word is the word spring. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure you use that word when you email your administrator to get credit today for today's session. So the rest of you, thank you guys for joining. And Treo is an employee wellness company, and we do cooking classes and all of this type of thing for people to really help engage health and wellness education around food, really about implementing these tips that you might learn in lots of different places and how you can really put them into day-to-day practice. So we know eating fruits and vegetables is good for us, but knowing how to do it is sometimes challenging. So we use these classes as a platform to really showcase how you can make fruits and vegetables or any type of healthful food easy and accessible. This is one pot, it's one cleanup, it's pretty low cost. We're doing vegetables and pasta, not very much cost is wrapped up into this. And I have a really hearty snack and an awesome meal that's going to fill me up. So if you're interested in doing some cooking classes with your group, you can always reach out to me. My contact information is on all the emails that you got for today's session. So thank you guys so much for joining. Really appreciate it. Any last questions as we're wrapping?
Looks like we're all set. Thank you everyone for joining. We really
Awesome.
appreciate your time and your participation.
Awesome. All right. Have a great afternoon and enjoy your lunch.